All Things Data podcast. In the spirit of Daniel Kahneman, Peter Diamandis, and Google Moonshots, brings together leading data scientists, technologists, business model experts, and futurists to discuss how to utilize, harness, and deploy data science and data-driven strategies to enable digital transformation. The hosts are Dr. Manjeet Rege, Associate Professor of Data Science, and Dan Yarmoluk, Director of Business Development of IoT and Data Science.
You're listening to the All Things Data podcast, where we talk about things related to data science, machine learning, AI. My name is Manjeet Rege. I'm the co-host along with Dan Yarmoluk. Hi, Dan.
Hi, Manjeet. How are you?
Doing well. So can you tell us a little bit about our guest today?
Yeah, I'm very excited about our guest. It's President of Black Hills IP, Ann McCrackin. Welcome, Ann.
Thank you very much.
I have been familiarized with Black Hills IP the last couple of years, as have you, Manjeet, and it's a legal technology, intelligence, AI service, and it's doing some cutting-edge stuff. So I'm anxious to have you on, Ann.
Well, great. I'm looking forward to it.
So, Ann, tell me a little bit about yourself and your background.
Sure. I'm a patent attorney. I was a law professor for several years. I'm currently president of Black Hills IP, as you said. My technical background, though, is in computer science and computer engineering. When I was in college, I did master's coursework on neural networks. I designed a neural network that analyzed geologic mining data for a gold mine in Montana. This is back in the mid-90s, before people were doing a lot of work with neural networks. So I have a mix of technology and law in my background.
Excellent. Technology and a legal background. What is Black Hills IP?
Black Hills IP is a U.S.-based company that uses technology to streamline the legal operations of U.S. law firms and corporate legal departments.
And is there a history or a lineage? I mean, where does Black Hills, what was the impetus for Black Hills and this service in general?
Sure. Our technology was originally developed to fill a need for a large IP law firm that was focused on quality and efficiency in their back office legal support. That's the work that's done by the non-lawyers in law firms. So the administrative work done by staff that's supporting the legal work is often very tedious and mundane and manual. And our basically foundation was based on working to streamline and automate those types of tasks within a law firm.
Now, does this come from a certain point in history in IP law where there was huge growth or extraneous costs or all of the above? I mean, can you tell us a little bit historically of that context there? Why did they even decide to do that, you know?
Yeah, so this goes back about 20 years, actually. At the time, I was a partner in a law firm here in the Minneapolis area. And there was a growing cost pressure from clients, and law firms were not were being restricted on the amount they could bill. They were having to meet very tight budgets, and in order to do that, they had to look internally and figure out how to cut their costs. And part of that was the administrative and non-lawyer parts of the services, which are, as we all know, a cost of the business, but it's not anything that the client wants to see on their bills when they're billed. Right. So the idea was, how can we automate and streamline that part of the legal services work?
And in the 90s, we know it was the dot-com boom. So was there just a surge of patents being filed?
Oh yeah, at the time, software was just becoming recognized as something that could be patented. There were dot-coms popping up everywhere. Everybody was trying to get patents on their technology. And so there was just a boom in the intellectual property law practice in particular, which is what the firm focused on that I was at the time.
All right. Well, can you tell us a little bit about intellectual property law? You know, what are the nuances versus other things that we've had?
So intellectual property law refers to patents, copyrights, trademarks, and trade secrets. Primarily, our work is in the area of patents and trademarks. For patents in particular, there's a process that has to be followed to get patent protection on an invention. And that process involves working with government agencies, whether it's the US Patent Office, the European Patent Office, the Canadian Patent Office. Every country has a patent office. And in order to get a patent, there are specific timelines for taking action and deadlines for doing things with that patent office that have to be followed. So usually a person who's acquiring a patent engages a patent attorney like me to handle their interactions with the patent offices and to manage all of these deadlines and steps in the process. Whether it's a law firm or it's a corporate legal department that's focused on intellectual property, you have a mix of attorneys who are doing the more substantive work, and then you have the paralegals and the other staff who are doing the administrative aspect of the process.
Right. So just from this brief conversation, we could understand that in the 90s with software and technology, patents, applications exploded. Also, we can recognize, as you're saying, foreign patent offices, globalization is taking stage, such that patent applications are now global and international in scope. So you have more documents and more actions to kind of deal with.
Right, absolutely.
So as you discuss that, can you tell us a little bit more of this administrative function or, paralegals, what you would call docketers and costs in IP law?
Sure. So the role of a paralegal or a docketer is typically a very highly skilled position. And those positions involve oftentimes preparing the documents, being familiar with the administrative requirements of these government agencies, patent offices, and tracking deadlines. A person who specializes just in the tracking of deadlines is often referred to as a docketer. Sometimes the function of tracking deadlines is referred to as calendaring. So you're basically keeping track of what's due and when it's due. These are critical functions because a deadline in the patent field can be very serious if it's missed. The rights that come with a patent, the exclusive rights that come with a patent, can be lost if you don't meet the deadlines set in the process. So if you miss a deadline, you may lose the right to get a patent on the idea or the invention that you're trying to seek protection for. And for a very valuable invention, that could be millions of dollars of damages. So if a law firm misses a deadline, gets sued for malpractice, and there have been instances where damages have been in the $30 million range. So those deadlines are very critical. And the function of the paralegal or the docketer that is managing those deadlines is a very important function within the firm or the legal department.
And to clarify, this is a long process to get a patent granted. So there's a lot of documents going back and forth. There's a lot of deadlines. There's a lot of balls in the air. This is not like a couple of little things in the application.
Correct. The process to get patent protection often takes 3 years or more. And in that 3-year time period, there's a lot of back and forth between the attorney and the patent office. So there are a lot of documents. A law firm or a large law firm or a large legal department might get hundreds of communications a day that they're having to go through and read to determine, first of all, if there even is a deadline involved, if there is, what that deadline is, and what information needs to be tracked about that particular deadline. So people are reading through long strings of email, large PDF documents. Sometimes even today, these things still come in paper, although that's not as common. But there's volumes, just tons of documents that people have to go through to keep track of the deadlines.
Mm-hmm.
So, Anne, this is really interesting. So what aspect of this entire process is Black Hills IP expert at, let's say, automating?
Black Hills IP is focused on automating the docketing process, so the tracking of the deadlines. And actually, let me back up a little bit on that. There are commercial software programs for tracking docketing deadlines and specifically for tracking deadlines in intellectual property. So there's a number of commercial software programs out there. We don't place those software programs What we do is we are focused on the process to get the information into those software programs correctly. So the areas where there's typically a mistake in the process tend to come from the human judgments that are made when a person is determining what needs to be added into these commercial docketing systems. That could be a person misidentifies a document, or they key in the wrong deadline, due date, or they just put the wrong information into the docketing system. The docketing system you can think of as like a GPS. If you put the wrong address into the GPS doesn't know that. It will navigate you to the location based on the input that you provided. Docketing software is the same way. It doesn't know if the information the docketer put in is wrong. It's going to calculate a due date based on the information that was entered. So where the mistakes often happen in this process is that judgment or decision-making process that currently goes on in the head of the person who's looking at all of these documents.
I see. So, I mean, that's really very nicely explained. In terms of automation, when I think about it from a software engineering perspective or from a machine learning perspective, a typical automation approach from a software engineering approach is to hard code the rules. And from a machine learning perspective is you provide examples of input and output and let the machine learning technique discover the rules. So which is the Black Hills approach? Is the automation happening based on hard coding, or is that machine learning AI based?
The core part is based on the hard-coded rules. So in that sense, it's more of an expert system. Although we do have some things that we're applying more of a AI-based machine learning approach for quality control and double checks in our processes. But we'll start with the hard-coded approach. So these documents and the deadlines are generally defined by rules. In the U.S., we have federal rules that define how long you have to do something when you're working with the U.S. Patent Office. Different types of documents have different time periods for responding, for example. But those aren't arbitrary. The same document always has the same time period for responding. So there's rules there, and those can be hard-coded into a system. So if you know what the document is, determining the rule to apply, and when I say rule to apply, I mean the information that you need to put into the docketing system, is pretty easy. The harder part is identifying what the document is. The document identification piece is complex because you have hundreds of documents coming in on a daily basis. They come in, like I said, varied formats. They might be coming in by email. They might be coming in by PDF. They are not always in the English language because we have documents from 160 some odd countries around the world potentially. Every country has a different format for these documents. Sometimes what you get is a translation from a very poor quality translation of these documents. So one of the really difficult things is to correctly identify the documents. But again, when you have people like we do in our organization that have the subject matter knowledge, they're experienced, trained docketing professionals. They know what the human is looking for to identify documents. They can build rules based on what it is that person's looking at. They're looking at the title of the document. They're looking at certain text that would appear in these documents. Are they looking for form numbers? There's all kinds of criteria that we have that we can identify documents with. So our document identification process is very rule-based, but also very sophisticated. And then once you've got the document identified, the next step is to determine what rule to apply for that document, what set of steps to follow. Then that's what's entered into the docketing system. Now, I said from a machine learning or artificial intelligence standpoint, we do have some things where we're also applying machine learning and artificial intelligence to verify that the docketing was done correctly. And in that sense, you can You can do a lot of things based on large data sets of documents and making sure the document that you've identified looks like all the other documents that you would typically have in that category or that classification. So we do have some of that as well.
So the way I think about it, and let me know if I'm incorrect in my understanding, is that it would be a hybrid of a expert system as well as a machine learning system, where your subject matter experts, that knowledge is embedded in the rule-based system. So that's your expert system part. Mm-hmm. And then, to verify the docketing process, you can have machine learning. Mm-hmm. And as well as, if I think about it, if you have a patent, let's say, filed overseas in different language, or if you have your counterpart sending you a document that's being used, that is expressing itself in a different language, you can use a machine learning API to translate that on the fly as well.
You could, but there's also good OCR technology for a lot of other languages too. So you don't even have to translate it. If you have the original native language document from a foreign patent office, let's say the Chinese or the Japanese patent office, those can be OCR'd and worked with in their native languages.
And also, Ann, just from my background, finding out what the document is not just strictly translation. There's other ways of identifying the document, correct?
Sure. And that's a great point, Dan, because there's a lot of other information about the context of the document that we might also be looking at, not just what's within what I would call the four corners of the document. So our system takes in a lot of different inputs when it's determining what the document is. And that, in my opinion, is the most critical part of the process, because once you identify what the document is, it's a very rule-based system. You just follow the rules. But if you get the document identified wrong, whether it's a human being or it's a machine, either way, if the document's identified wrong, then the action you take is also going to be wrong. So by moving to a machine making that decision, we have a lot higher accuracy in the determination of what the document is, because when you think about a human who's doing this every day, looking at 100 documents maybe in a day, jumping from something from Canada to the US to Europe to Japan, there's a lot of room for error there and misinterpretation.
And can you talk a little bit about how much data is now involved in IP law per se?
Sure, a lot. And Dan, you commented earlier about just in general, even years ago, the increase in patent filings and the volume of data that's out there. Like I said, we get hundreds of documents a day. You get things coming in email and in PDFs and in varied formats. And there's just a very, very high volume of communications that are being processed by the docketers that are in these positions.
One of the things that I often talk about is when you have to transform your company, your enterprise into an AI-first company, is to figure out the processes that could be automated, not necessarily the jobs that could be automated. And a good initial start there is to figure out what are the pain points in a business that perhaps could be automated. So in this particular patent filing process, are there specific pain points that you can pinpoint and say, this is something that was ideal for automation and this is something that you automated? And looking down the line as well, are there specific business value tasks as well that could be automated?
Sure. So talking about the pain points, historically, this has all been done by a human being reviewing documents and manually entering data into these commercial docketing systems. So first of all, it's very resource intensive and it's inefficient. You have a person who has to carefully read all of these documents, determine if there's any deadlines, determine what information needs to be extracted from the documents and put into these systems. And then oftentimes the traditional quality control process is something called second eye review. That means a second person, a different person, double checks what the first person did. And to do that, they have to read those same documents. It's a very slow and inefficient process. And then you think about the fact that these deadlines are being tracked in software systems. Oftentimes the information that's going to go into those systems exists in electronic form in some other place, but most of the time the humans are having to rekey this information into the docketing system that will track the deadline. So all of that's really, really inefficient. Talk about the volume of correspondence that's processed. Then, another pain point is that you have very highly skilled, knowledgeable paralegals and docketers doing very oftentimes mundane tasks, because these individuals, to be able to identify these documents from 100 plus different countries and a lot of different formats, they have a lot of knowledge that they have to apply to do that. But besides that decision-making process, they're often asked to do a lot of mundane things like downloading the copy of the document that they have to read from the patent office, convert emails to PDF format to save them, renaming PDF files to follow a particular naming convention that an organization wants. All of these things, uploading the PDF documents into a document management system for the organization. All those types of tasks are often added to the docketing process or the docketing workflow. Those are very administrative in nature and very mundane, quite honestly, and low value tasks being done by very high skilled individuals that are, expensive resources within an organization. So that's another pain point. And I'd say a third pain point is because it's manual, it's very error prone. Your person, these docketers are doing, seeing a very high volume of documents. It's easy to make a mistake. It's easy to misidentify something, read something too quickly, overlook something in a multiple page document, just flat out misinterpret something.
So that is like the actual, what Black Hills saw as the opportunity is that, one, we have to have a highly skilled person to be able to do this, but then they're doing non-complex or very mundane tasks, which creates error-prone kind of playing field. At the same time, we have them explicitly to avoid errors.
Exactly.
And to mitigate risk.
Yeah.
So it's kind of a situation that begs to be automated with what we know today. Yesteryear, we just thought we'd get a better person so it just is, it's an interesting situation where we have really smart people doing mundane things that can have the opportunity for a lot of errors or just tired, fatigue,
Right. And another thing that happens is you have these people that maybe have worked in an organization for 20 years and they retire or leave for some reason. All that knowledge is in their head and you lose knowledge too. So then you start over with another person that you have to train if that's all in the person's head.
In addition to the manual versus automation, there would also be an aspect of cost to this, right? Because I would assume that an automated docketing process might be more cost efficient versus a manual approach.
Yeah, and that's a good observation as well. So the highly skilled paralegals and docketers are generally more senior level positions, and they obviously you have a comparable salary that goes along with that kind of position. And if you have multiple people in your department based on the volume of work, you often have multiple people doing this kind of work. When you can take that and you can do it with technology, you allow those resources to be used for higher value tasks in the organization and get more benefit that way, and then reduce your costs for the more administrative work, which is the docketing part of the process.
So just to go back to the manual versus automation, since I'm not part of the legal field, are there firms out there who do this entire process even today completely manually?
Oh yeah, that's how most people do it today, is completely manually.
I see.
That's the way it's been done for years and years. And it's funny, if you go back 30, 40 years in the legal practice. This is before the day of the personal computer and everything was done manually. What has changed is we've gone to more electronic and digital mode with the way our documents are handled, the way they're stored, the way they're processed, but we haven't progressed in the way that we do the decision-making part of the process. That's still manual, and the entry of the data into these systems is still manual, even though everything else has evolved drastically in this period of time in the legal field. That one part of the process is still being done the way it was 20, 30 years ago.
So, I look at it as, a huge competitive advantage for a firm like Black Hills to be at the forefront of embracing machine learning and AI. But if I have a client who's interested in filing a patent, are clients aware of this? That is, are clients aware of a manual versus the benefit of, taking an automated approach?
A lot of law firms who work for larger corporate clients, so large electronics companies, for example, file a lot of patent applications, and they will have multiple law firms working with them and filing hundreds, if not thousands, of patent applications a year. In that context where you view the client as the corporation, many corporate legal departments are looking to have their outside counsel use technology and know that they're applying AI solutions. So for sophisticated clients like that, they may be specifically looking for that. If you, as an individual inventor, went to a patent attorney and asked to have a patent application filed, that's probably not what your concern would be and not anything that you'd be aware of. But those very sophisticated, large corporate clients are looking for these types of services and expecting that from their law firms these days.
I see. When I think about this as either an expert system or from a machine learning perspective, an expert system becomes smarter over time with the addition of rules. A machine learning system with the, having made available more data, it becomes more smarter. Is that something which is applicable here?
In both examples, yes. Certainly, the rules sometimes change. The government patent office might change its timeline for doing something, or it might add a new requirement. So with a system like ours, that's easy to accommodate because we can modify the existing rule or add a new rule into the expert system depending on what the case is. So definitely that's easy to do. And even sometimes we realize that there are situations that maybe hadn't been covered that come up in rare occasions, and we need to add a rule to cover that. So those are very easy to deal with. And then for things where we're using machine learning, we have a huge volume of data that we process every day. And that just grows and grows and grows. So our data set that we're using for machine learning just continues to get bigger and better all the time. And that, as you know, for machine learning is a good thing.
Mm-hmm. And can you talk a little bit about the Open API initiative?
Yeah. So one of the problems in the legal profession is that law firms and lawyers have been slow to adopt technology. So what's happened in our profession is there are, legal software systems like the docketing systems and other tools that are used in a law firm that don't talk to each other. So, you have a docketing system, you have a DMS, you have patent office data, you have all of these systems, but they tend to be isolated. And it inhibits the use of automation and AI because you can't pass data freely between these systems. So there's an organization that's advocating for open APIs in legal technology and legal software. And the idea is that if we can facilitate the transfer of data between these different legal systems, it will allow law firms and corporations to take advantage of AI and automation tools that are out there and really enhance the operations in the legal profession.
So that is one of the initiatives that you guys spearheaded, correct, Ann?
That's correct. And there's a website called openlegalapi.com. We're asking people to go to that website and sign a petition that we're going to use to try to encourage organizations in the legal profession, particularly in the IP industry, to make their APIs available so that we can more freely pass data between these systems.
Wow, that's ambitious. That's fantastic. Well, Ann, it was so interesting to hear about the legal field and these back office processes and automation. I mean, a lot of the latest research, at least that I'm hearing from Manjeet, is people are often looking for the holy grail with AI and machine learning, but many of these pain points, as you described, are non-critical functions that have costs or resource intensive or time consuming, are really the opportunities for pretty significant and achievable wins. So this is one of those areas where paralegals and docketing expertise can be streamlined faster, better, just more productive all the way around. So we'd look to hear more from you guys as you evangelize and bring this industry forward.
Well, thank you both for taking the time to hear what we're doing.
It's very exciting.
Sure.
All right. Well, that's another edition of All Things Data podcast, and we'll be back in a couple weeks with the head of digital strategy from Cognizant.